A night that changed everything. The Miami skyline glowed orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. Jackson Blake stood on the balcony of his penthouse suite at the Fontainebleau Hotel, watching boats drift across Biscayne Bay at 42. He had built a tech empire that merged artificial intelligence with fashion retail, but success had come at a personal cost. 3 years after his divorce, he still felt the sting of betrayal from a wife who had loved his bank account more than him. His phone buzzed with a message from the concierge service. "Miss Price will arrive at 8 p.m. as requested." Jackson sighed, setting down his bourbon. These arrangements had become routine during his business travels. Professional companionship without the complications of real relationships. No expectations beyond a few hours of distraction from the loneliness that money could not cure. The woman at the door at precisely 8 o'clock. The doorbell chimed. Jackson opened the door to find a woman who immediately caught him off guard. Danielle Price was not what he expected. She wore a simple navy dress that showed taste rather than extravagance. Her auburn hair fell naturally around her shoulders, and her green eyes held an intelligence that seemed at odds with her profession. "Good evening, Mr. Blake," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I hope I am not late." "Right on time," Jackson replied, stepping aside to let her enter. "Please, call me Jackson." She walked into the suite with careful grace, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings. Unlike other women the agency had sent, she did not pretend to be accustomed to such luxury. Her genuine reaction to the space made him curious. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Jackson asked, moving toward the bar. "Water would be perfect." "Thank you," Danielle answered. Setting her small clutch on the side table, Jackson poured sparkling water into crystal glasses, noting her choice. Most companions ordered expensive champagne or cocktails, playing a role they thought he wanted. Her simplicity was refreshing. Conversation before the storm, they sat in the living area, making small talk about Miami, the weather, and the art hanging on the walls. Danielle spoke about design and color theory with such passion that Jackson found himself genuinely engaged. She mentioned studying at the Fashion Institute before circumstances forced her to leave. "What happened?" Jackson asked, sensing there was more to her story. Danielle hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Life happened. Sometimes we make choices we never imagined we would have to make." The vulnerability in her voice struck something in Jackson. He recognized the weight of difficult decisions, the compromises that survival sometimes demanded. For the next hour, they talked like two people discovering unexpected common ground. It's not a client and a hired companion. As the evening progressed, the Miami nightlife buzzed below them. Lights from South Beach flickered in the distance, and the sound of distant music drifted through the open balcony door. Jackson found himself reluctant to move the evening in the expected direction. The moment everything changed, finally. Danielle stood and walked toward the bedroom. "We should not waste your evening," she said, her professional mask sliding into place. Jackson followed, feeling the familiar disconnect between what he had paid for and what he actually wanted. The bedroom was elegant, with a king bed and soft lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. Danielle turned to face him, and for a moment she simply stood there, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the zipper of her dress. Then something unexpected happened. As the dress slipped from her shoulders, a single tear rolled down her cheek. She tried to wipe it away quickly, but Jackson had already seen it. The carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing raw emotion beneath. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling the dress back up. "This is so unprofessional." Jackson grabbed a silk robe from the closet and handed it to her. "Here, put this on. We do not have to do anything you are not comfortable with." Danielle looked at him with surprise and confusion. "But you paid a substantial amount. The agency will expect me to fulfill the arrangement." "I do not care what the agency expects," Jackson said firmly. "Sit down. Talk to me. What is really going on?" The truth comes out. They moved back to the living room. Danielle wrapped herself in the robe, looking smaller and younger than before. After a long silence, she began to speak. "My nephew Tommy is 8 years old," she started, her voice breaking slightly. 6 months ago, he was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect that requires immediate surgery. The procedure costs over $200,000, and my sister Helen has no insurance that covers it. She works 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Jackson listened without interrupting, watching the emotions play across her face. I was in my final year at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, Danielle continued. I had a full scholarship and a promising future. But when Tommy got sick, I dropped everything. Helen is a single mother. She was drowning in medical bills. I tried working regular jobs, but the money was not enough, not even close. She paused, taking a shaky breath. A friend mentioned this agency. She said I could make in 1 week what would take months in a normal job. I told myself it was temporary, just until we had enough for Tommy's surgery. But tonight, standing in that bedroom, I realized what I had become, and I hate myself for it. An unexpected offer, the silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Jackson walked to the window, staring out at the Miami night. He thought about his own journey. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Seattle, building his company from nothing, he remembered the desperation of early days, the choices that kept him awake at night. "How much have you raised so far?" he asked quietly.
"About $90,000, Danielle replied.
"I have been doing this for 4 months. Jackson turned to face her. "What if I told you there was another way?" Danielle looked up, hope and suspicion mixing in her expression. "What do you mean?" "My company, Blake Technologies, just launched a new division focused on AI-driven personalized fashion," Jackson explained. "We need creative minds who understand design, people who can bridge the gap between technology and human aesthetics. Based on what you have told me tonight about your studies and your passion for design, I think you could be exactly what we need." "Are you offering me a job?" Danielle asked, disbelief clear in her voice. "I am offering you an opportunity," Jackson corrected. "A 3-month contract as a design consultant. The pay would be enough to cover your nephew's surgery. With benefits that include health insurance you can extend to family members. If your work is good, the position could become permanent." Questions and doubts. Danielle stood up, the robe falling around her like armor. "Why would you do this? You do not even know me. How do you know I am not lying about everything?" Jackson smiled slightly. "I built my career on reading people, on taking calculated risks. Everything about you tonight tells me you were genuine. The way you looked at the art, the way you spoke about design, even the way you cried. You cannot fake that kind of authenticity."
"But
what do you get out of this?" Danielle pressed. "Nobody gives away opportunities like this without wanting something in return." "I get a talented designer for my company," Jackson replied. "And maybe I get to help someone who deserves a break. Consider it an investment in potential." He paused. "Besides, everyone deserves a chance to chase their dreams without sacrificing their dignity." Danielle sat back down, her mind clearly racing. "This seems too good to be true." "It is real," Jackson assured her. "Tomorrow morning, I will have my attorney draft a contract. You can review it with your own lawyer if you want. Everything will be transparent and professional." The night air drifted through the balcony doors, carrying the scent of ocean salt and tropical flowers. Danielle looked at Jackson with tears in her eyes, but this time, they were different. These were tears of relief, of possibility, of hope rekindled. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "I say you will think about it," Jackson suggested. "The guest room in this suite is yours for tonight if you want it. No strings attached. Tomorrow, we can discuss details over breakfast." A new beginning. Danielle accepted the offer to stay in the guest room. Before she closed the door, she turned back to Jackson one more time. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. Jackson considered the question carefully. "Because 3 years ago, my ex-wife left me for my former best friend. She had been with me for my money from the start. Since then, I have been going through the motions, building my business bigger, but feeling emptier. Tonight, talking with you, I remembered why I started this company in the first place. It was not just about making money. It was about creating something meaningful." He looked at her directly. "You reminded me that real success is not about what you accumulate, but about what you contribute. So maybe I am doing this as much for myself as for you." Danielle nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. "Thank you, Jackson, for seeing me as more than what I was doing tonight. Thank you for being brave enough to be honest," he replied. After she closed the door, Jackson returned to the balcony. The Miami night stretched before him, full of possibility. He had come to this city for a business conference, expecting another forgettable thing with temporary company. Instead, he had found something unexpected. A reminder of his own humanity, and perhaps the beginning of something that could change both their lives. In the guest room, Danielle lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her phone showed messages from the agency asking how the evening went. She ignored them. For the first time in 4 months, she felt like herself again. The shame that had been crushing her lifted slightly, replaced by cautious optimism. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult conversations. But tonight, for the first time since Tommy got sick, Danielle Price allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The city lights twinkled below as both Jackson and Danielle drifted towards sleep, neither fully realizing how profoundly this unexpected encounter would reshape their futures. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely places, and sometimes the connections we make in our darkest moments become the foundations for our brightest tomorrows. A new morning. A new life. The Miami sunrise painted the hotel suite in shades of gold and amber. Danielle woke to unfamiliar comfort, momentarily disoriented by the luxury surrounding her. Then the memories of the previous night flooded back. The tears, the confession, and Jackson's impossible offer. She checked her phone to find several missed calls from the agency and a text from her sister, Helen, asking how she was doing, taking a deep breath. Danielle composed herself and walked out to find Jackson already awake, working on his laptop at the dining table. He looked up and smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression that put her at ease. "Good morning," he said, closing his computer. "I ordered breakfast. Hope you like fresh fruit and pastries?" "That sounds perfect," Danielle replied, taking a seat across from him. The morning light made everything feel more real, more concrete than the emotional haze of last night, the contract and the reality of her breakfast. Jackson pulled out his tablet and showed Danielle the contract his attorney had prepared overnight. She read through it carefully, her fashion design background, giving her an eye for detail that translated well to legal documents. The terms were more generous than she could have imagined. A 3-month consultancy at $15,000 per month, with full health benefits extending to immediate family members. A signing bonus of $50,000 to be paid within 48 hours. If her performance met expectations, the position would convert to full-time employment with additional benefits. "This is incredible," Danielle said quietly. "But I have to ask again, what if I am not good enough? What if my designs do not work for your company?" Jackson leaned back in his chair. "Then we part ways professionally after 3 months. And you still have enough money for Tommy's surgery, plus a solid addition to your portfolio. But I do not think that will happen. I have built my career on recognizing talent, Danielle. I see it in you." She signed the contract with trembling hands, feeling like she was signing away one life and stepping into another. Jackson immediately initiated the wire transfer for the signing bonus, showing her the confirmation on his phone. "It will be in your account by end of business today," he said. "Now let me tell you about San Francisco and what you will be walking into." Welcome to Silicon Valley. 3 days later, Danielle found herself on a plane to San Francisco, her few possessions packed into 2 suitcases. Helen had cried when Danielle told her about the job opportunity, asking dozens of questions about how this miracle had happened. Danielle kept the full truth to herself, saying only that she had met a businessman who recognized her potential. Tommy's surgery was scheduled for the following month at a top cardiac center, fully covered by the insurance Jackson's company provided. The relief on Helen's face had made everything worth it. Jackson's assistant had arranged a furnished apartment for Danielle in the Mission District, a trendy neighborhood filled with murals and authentic Mexican restaurants. The 1-bedroom unit was modest by San Francisco standards. It felt like a palace compared to the cramped space she had been sharing with Helen and Tommy in Queens. On Monday morning, Danielle arrived at Blake Technologies headquarters, a sleek glass building in the south of Market District. The lobby featured installations of AI-generated art that morphed and changed based on viewer reactions. A perfect representation of the company's mission to blend technology with creativity. Facing the skeptics, Jackson's business partner, Greg Harrison, greeted her with polite skepticism. He was a sharp-featured man in his late 40s, with the calculating eyes of someone who had seen too many business deals go wrong. "Jackson tells me you have innovative ideas about personalized fashion," Greg said, his tone neutral but guarded. "We have a team of Stanford and MIT graduates working on this project. What unique perspective do you bring?" Danielle felt the weight of the challenge but refused to be intimidated. "With respect, Mr. Harrison, algorithms can analyze data and predict trends. But they cannot feel fabric or understand why a particular cut makes someone feel confident. Fashion is not just about logic. It is about emotion, identity, and self-expression. I bring the human element your technology needs to truly connect with customers." Greg raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. "Fair enough. Let me show you to your workspace." The design lab was a creative paradise filled with fabric samples, sketching tablets, and holographic displays showing 3D garment prototypes. Danielle met her team, 3 other designers, 2 software engineers, and a project manager named Paula Chen, who would become her closest ally. Paula, a sharp-witted woman in her 30s with bright purple highlights in her black hair, took Danielle under her wing immediately. "Do not let Greg intimidate you," she whispered during the tour. "He questions everyone Jackson hires. But if you do good work, he will come around." Proving her worth, the first weeks were grueling. Danielle worked 12-hour days, learning the company's proprietary software while contributing design concepts for their upcoming launch. The AI system could generate thousands of design variations, but it lacked the intuitive understanding of what made clothes feel special. Danielle introduced a framework she called emotional mapping, where designs were tagged, not just by style categories, but by the feelings they evoked. Confidence, comfort, adventure, sophistication. She created mood boards that combined traditional fashion sketches with data visualization. Bridging the gap between art and algorithm, her breakthrough came during a team presentation 3 weeks into her tenure. She showcased a collection concept that used AI to analyze a customer's social media, music preferences, and even calendar events to suggest outfits that match their lifestyle and upcoming activities. Imagine a busy professional who has a job interview Tuesday morning and a first date Friday night. Danielle explained, her confidence growing as she presented. "Our system does not just recommend clothes. It recommends versions of themselves they want to be. The powerful executive on Tuesday, the relaxed romantic on Friday. Same person, different chapters of their story." The room fell silent for a moment before Paula started clapping. Soon others joined in. Even Greg nodded approvingly, making notes on his tablet. After the meeting, Jackson caught up with Danielle in the hallway. "That was impressive," he said simply. "You were exceeding my already high expectations." "Thank you," Danielle replied, feeling pride swell in her chest. "This feels right. Like I am finally doing what I was meant to do." Growing complications as the weeks turned into months, Danielle's professional success grew alongside an undeniable personal tension with Jackson. They maintained strict professional boundaries at the office, but there were moments. Lingering eye contact during meetings. Accidental touches when reviewing designs. Conversations that stretched late into the evening about topics far beyond work. Jackson's sister, Rebecca, visited from New York for a weekend, and Jackson invited Danielle to join them for dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Sausalito. Rebecca was a free-spirited artist with paint-stained fingers and an uncanny ability to read people. "So you are the designer my brother cannot stop talking about," Rebecca said with a knowing smile as they settled into their seats. "Rebecca," Jackson warned, but his sister just laughed. "What?" "I am just making an observation. You mention her design philosophy more than you mention quarterly earnings. That is significant." Danielle felt her cheeks warm. "Your brother gave me an incredible opportunity when I needed it most. I am just trying to live up to his faith in me." Rebecca studied her for a moment, then softened. He told me a little about your situation. About your nephew? How is he doing? The surgery is scheduled for next week, Danielle said, her voice catching slightly. The doctors are optimistic. Without this job, without Jackson, none of this would be possible. My brother has a good heart, Rebecca said, glancing at Jackson with affection. He just does not always let people see it. Our parents died when we were young. Jackson practically raised me while building his first startup. He learned early to protect himself, to keep emotions separate from business. But with you, I see something different in him. Jackson cleared his throat. Can we order some wine before my sister completely embarrasses me? The evening was lovely, filled with laughter and easy conversation. But underneath the pleasant surface, Danielle felt the current of something unspoken flowing between her and Jackson. Tommy's surgery. Danielle took emergency leave and flew to New York. Jackson surprised her by showing up at the hospital, claiming he had business meetings in the city anyway. Helen looked at him with curiosity and gratitude, clearly wondering about the true nature of his relationship with her sister. The 6-hour surgery felt like an eternity. Danielle paced the waiting room while Jackson sat calmly, occasionally offering words of reassurance. When the surgeon finally emerged with good news, Danielle broke down crying, and Jackson held her while she sobbed with relief. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for everything." Jackson gently tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. "You do not have to keep thanking me, Danielle. You have earned every opportunity you have received." In that moment, with hospital fluorescent lights humming overhead and the smell of antiseptic in the air, something shifted between them. The line between gratitude and affection blurred into something neither could fully name. Back to San Francisco. Returning to San Francisco, Danielle threw herself into work with renewed energy. Tommy's recovery was progressing beautifully, and she felt like she could finally breathe again. The launch of their personalized fashion platform was scheduled for 3 months away, and the entire company buzzed with anticipation. However, not everyone was happy about Danielle's rapid rise. A senior designer named Brett Michaels had been with the company for 5 years and resented what he saw as preferential treatment. During a team meeting, he made a pointed comment about connections mattering more than credentials. Paula jumped to Danielle's defense immediately, but the damage was done. Office rumors began circulating about how exactly Danielle had secured her position. Some people whispered that she must be romantically involved with Jackson, while others suggested more unsavory connections. Danielle tried to ignore the gossip, but it wore on her. One evening, working late in the design lab, she found Jackson reviewing quarterly reports in his office down the hall. "Can I talk to you?" she asked from his doorway. "Of course. Come in." She closed the door and sat across from his desk. "People are talking about us. About how I got this job." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Let them talk. Your work speaks for itself, does it?" Danielle challenged. "Or will everything I accomplish here be seen as a favor to the boss?" "I worked so hard to leave that other life behind, Jackson. I do not want to be defined by my worst moments or by rumors about how I got ahead." Jackson stood and walked around the desk, leaning against it to face her directly. "Danielle, you are one of the most talented designers we have. The emotional mapping framework is revolutionizing how we think about personalized fashion. You have earned respect through merit, not through any connection to me. Then why do I feel like I am still selling something I should not have to sell?" she asked quietly. "My dignity? My reputation? Just in different packaging?" The question hung heavy between them. Jackson reached out and took her hand, a gesture that crossed the professional boundary they had carefully maintained. "Because you are scared," he said gently. "Scared that good things are not allowed to happen to you without a price? I understand that fear, Danielle. After my divorce, I convinced myself that every connection had ulterior motives. But sometimes, people help each other simply because they can. And sometimes, professional respect grows into something more without diminishing what came before." Danielle looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. "Are you saying there is something more between us?" "I am saying," Jackson replied carefully, "that I have been trying very hard to keep things professional because I did not want you to feel pressured or obligated. But yes, I care about you as more than an employee. I have for a while now. The confession, the admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and danger. Danielle stood up, stepping closer to him. I care about you too, she confessed, but I am terrified. Everything in my life right now comes from you. My job, my apartment, Tommy's health care. What happens if we try this and it does not work? I lose everything again. Jackson shook his head. That is not how this works. Your contract is ironclad. Your position here is based on your performance, which has been exceptional. If we dated and it did not work out, you would still have your job, your apartment, everything. I would never take away what you have earned. Can you promise that? Danielle asked, searching his face. I can, Jackson said firmly. But more importantly, I can promise that I will never make you feel like you owe me anything. What I did for you that first night in Miami, I did because it was right. Everything that has happened since then, you made happen through your own talent and hard work. Danielle felt tears prickling her eyes again, but this time they were different. I spent so long feeling ashamed of who I had become. You gave me back my dignity, my dreams. How do I separate gratitude from actual feelings? Maybe you do not have to, Jackson suggested softly. Maybe gratitude can exist alongside genuine affection. Maybe two broken people helping each other heal is not a weakness but a strength. They stood there for a long moment. The city lights of San Francisco twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them. Finally, Danielle made her decision. She stepped forward and kissed him, gentle and uncertain at first, then with growing certainty. When they pulled apart, Jackson smiled. We should probably talk about company policy regarding workplace relationships. Danielle laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Always the businessman. Always the designer, he countered. Already thinking about how to make this work, they decided to keep the relationship private for now, wanting to establish it on solid ground before facing office scrutiny. Over the following weeks, they dated quietly. Dinners at out-of-way restaurants. Walks through Golden Gate Park, movie nights at Danielle's apartment. For the first time in years, both of them felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. The platform launch approaches us. The launch date for the personalized fashion platform approached. The entire company worked at a fever pitch. Danielle's emotional mapping system had become the centerpiece of their marketing campaign. Positioning Blake Technologies as the company that understood fashion was about identity. Not just clothing. Tommy flew out to San Francisco with Helen for a visit, finally recovered enough to travel. Seeing her nephew running around her apartment full of energy and life, Danielle felt overwhelming gratitude for how far they had all come. Jackson took them all to dinner at a family-friendly restaurant in North Beach, and Helen pulled Danielle aside during dessert. He is in love with you, Helen said simply, and unless I am completely wrong, you feel the same way. Danielle did not deny it. It is complicated. Love usually is, Helen replied with a knowing smile. But complicated does not mean wrong. He seems like a good man, Danielle. And more importantly, he sees the real you. That is rare and worth holding on to. The evening ended with Tommy giving Jackson an enthusiastic hug, thanking him for making my aunt happy again. Jackson looked momentarily overwhelmed by the gesture, and Danielle saw in his eyes the same vulnerability he had shown her that first night in Miami. They were both people who had learned to protect themselves, who had built walls around their hearts after being hurt. But slowly, carefully, they were learning to trust again. The gala that changed everything. The company's annual gala celebrating the platform launch was held at a converted warehouse in the Design District, transformed into a futuristic fashion showcase. Holographic models walked virtual runways wearing designs generated by their AI system, while guests mingled among interactive displays, demonstrating the emotional mapping technology. Danielle wore a dress of her own design, a flowing emerald creation that the AI had suggested based on her personal data, proving the system's effectiveness. She felt beautiful and confident, finally comfortable in her own skin after so many months of struggle. Jackson arrived with Rebecca, who had flown in for the event. Greg Harrison was there with his wife, along with investors, tech journalists, and fashion industry influencers. The evening was crucial for the company's future, a public debut that would determine whether their innovation resonated with the market. "You look stunning," Jackson whispered when he found Danielle near the champagne fountain. They had maintained their professional distance in public, but the look in his eyes conveyed everything words could not. "So do you," she replied with a smile. He wore a custom suit that she had helped design, traditional tailoring enhanced with subtle tech elements that glowed softly under certain lighting. The presentation went flawlessly. Paula gave an overview of the technology, then invited Danielle on stage to explain the emotional mapping framework. Standing before hundreds of people, Danielle spoke passionately about fashion as personal narrative. About clothes as tools for self-expression and transformation, the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Fashion bloggers tweeted praise in real time. Investors approached Greg with interested questions. Everything was going perfectly until Bret Michaels, emboldened by too much champagne, decided to cause trouble. The confrontation: Danielle was networking with a fashion magazine editor when Bret approached. His face flushed and his words slurred slightly. "Quite a success story, is it not?" he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "From nothing to star designer in just a few months? Really makes you wonder how someone manages that kind of meteoric rise." The editor looked uncomfortable. Danielle kept her composure, though her heart pounded. "Hard work and innovation," she replied evenly. "The same way anyone succeeds. Right?" "Of course," Bret continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Nothing to do with special relationships or knowing the right people in the right ways." Paula appeared at Danielle's side immediately, her expression furious. "Bret, you are drunk. Go home before you embarrass yourself further." "Your Bret was past caring?" "Everyone knows she came from nowhere. No degree, no experience, just suddenly Jackson Blake's favorite employee. You all know what that means." The nearby conversations had stopped. People were watching now, sensing drama. Danielle felt her face, burning the shame she had worked so hard to overcome, threatening to drown her again. Then Jackson was there, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Bret, you are fired," Jackson said calmly, but with absolute authority. "Collect your things tomorrow and speak with HR about your severance package." "You cannot fire me for telling the truth," Bret protested. "I am firing you for creating a hostile work environment and for publicly slandering a colleague," Jackson corrected. "Now leave before I have security escort you out." As Bret stumbled away, the gathered crowd remained silent. Jackson turned to address them directly, his voice clear and confident. "Since we are apparently having this conversation publicly, let me be clear about something," he began. "Danielle Price is one of the most talented designers I have ever worked with. Her emotional mapping framework is revolutionary and will change how we think about personalized fashion. She earned her position here through creativity, intelligence, and an extraordinary ability to understand human needs." He paused, looking directly at Danielle. "She is also someone I deeply care about on a personal level. These two facts are not mutually exclusive. Her professional achievements stand entirely on their own merit. Anyone who suggests otherwise is welcome to review her work portfolio, which speaks for itself." The crowd murmured. Rebecca was smiling. Greg looked resigned, but not disapproving. And Danielle felt tears threatening again, but this time from gratitude and relief. "Furthermore," Jackson continued, "I want to share something about my own past that might provide perspective. 10 years ago, I was sleeping in my car while trying to launch my first startup. I showered at the gym and lived on ramen noodles. My ex-wife met me during that time, or so I thought. Years later, I discovered she had researched my family connections and calculated that I would eventually succeed. She married my potential, not my person." The vulnerability in his voice silenced any remaining whispers. "That experience taught me to be cautious, to question people's motives. But it also taught me something else, that everyone has a story, everyone faces struggles, and everyone deserves the chance to be judged by who they become, not where they started." He looked around the room. "Danielle has shown more courage and resilience than most people will ever need to demonstrate. She deserves respect, admiration, and the opportunity to let her work define her. Anyone who cannot offer that does not belong at Blake Technologies. The aftermath of gala continued, but the energy had shifted. People approached Danielle with genuine respect, asking intelligent questions about her design philosophy. The fashion magazine editor promised a feature article. Investors praised her presentation skills. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Jackson and Danielle stood on the venue's rooftop terrace, looking out over the San Francisco skyline. "You did not have to do that," Danielle said quietly. "You exposed yourself to protect me." "Yes, I did," Jackson replied. "Because you were right before when you said people would always question how you got here. The only way to silence those questions was with truth and transparency. But now everyone knows we are together," Danielle pointed out. "Is that a problem?" She considered the question, then shook her head. "No, actually it feels like freedom. No more hiding, no more pretending, just being who we are." Jackson took her hand. "Who are we, Danielle?" "We are two people who found each other in an unlikely moment," she said thoughtfully. "Two people who were both pretending to be something they were not. You were pretending that business success was enough, and I was pretending I could sacrifice my dignity without it costing my soul. And now we get to be real," Danielle finished. "Complicated, imperfect, but real." 6 months later, the fashion platform launched to critical acclaim and commercial success. Danielle's emotional mapping system became an industry standard, copied by competitors, but never quite replicated. She finished her degree through an online program, officially earning her credentials, even though her practical experience had already surpassed most academic training. Tommy thrived, his heart strong and his future bright. Helen got a promotion at her job and started dating a kind man who coached Tommy's youth soccer team. The Price family, once drowning in medical debt and desperation, had found solid ground. Rebecca moved to San Francisco permanently, opening a gallery in the Mission District where Danielle's apartment was. The two women became close friends, bonding over art and shared understanding of Jackson's sometimes frustrating emotional guardedness. Greg Harrison, initially skeptical of Danielle, became one of her strongest advocates. He appreciated results over pedigree, and Danielle's contributions to the company's bottom line spoke louder than any credential. Brett Michaels found work at a competing firm and eventually sent Danielle a quiet apology email. She appreciated the gesture, but did not respond. Having moved beyond the need for his validation, the fashion show 1 year after that fateful night in Miami, Blake Technologies hosted a fashion show featuring a complete collection designed by Danielle and generated through their AI platform. The theme was transformation, celebrating the journey from who we were to who we choose to become. The venue was packed with fashion industry leaders, tech innovators, and journalists from major publications. Models walked the runway in designs that shifted from understated basics to bold statement pieces, representing the spectrum of human identity and expression. Backstage before the show, Danielle felt the familiar flutter of nerves. Jackson found her adjusting a model's collar for the third time, channeling anxiety into perfectionism. "Everything is going to be perfect," he assured her, taking her hands to still them. "How do you know?" she asked, searching his eyes. "Because you created it," he said simply. "And everything you create is remarkable." The show was indeed perfect. The designs received a standing ovation. Fashion critics declared it a triumph. Orders flooded in before the models even finished their final walk. At the after-party, surrounded by congratulations and celebration, Danielle found a quiet moment to call Helen and Tommy on video chat. "Aunt Donnie, you are famous," Tommy shouted, excitedly, having watched the live stream with his school friends. "Not famous, sweetie, just lucky," Danielle corrected with a laugh. "No, you worked hard," Helen interjected seriously. "You earned this, Donnie, every single bit of it." After saying goodbye, Danielle turned to find Jackson watching her with that look he had, the one that made her feel seen and valued in a way she had never experienced before. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. They moved to the dance floor, swaying to music that was probably too upbeat for slow dancing, but neither cared. Around them, their employees, investors, and friends celebrated a successful evening. But for Danielle and Jackson, this moment was about something more than business success. The full circle. "Do you ever think about that night in Miami?" Danielle asked quietly, her head resting against Jackson's shoulder. every day, he admitted. Not because of what could have happened, but because of what did. That night changed both our lives. Do you regret it, the choice you made? Jackson pulled back to look at her directly. Danielle, that night I chose to see a human being instead of a transaction. I chose compassion over entitlement. Those are never choices to regret. I used to be ashamed, Danielle confessed, of what I was doing, where I was. But now I realize that experience taught me something important. Taught me about judgment, about how people make impossible choices when faced with impossible circumstances. It made me more compassionate. It brought you to me, Jackson added softly. It brought me to me, Danielle corrected gently. You opened a door, Jackson, but I walked through it. I did the work, earned the respect, built the career. We have to remember that distinction. Jackson smiled, appreciating her wisdom. You are absolutely right. I facilitated an opportunity. You created your own success. Rebecca appeared at their side, grinning widely. Stop being adorable. People are watching. Let them watch, Danielle said boldly. No longer afraid of scrutiny or judgment, the proposal as the party wound down and guests began departing. Jackson asked Danielle to take a walk with him. They strolled through the design district, past galleries and boutiques, until they reached a small park with a view of the bay.